Hi everyone. Today we are with Christina Hoag, an author. And please, could you tell our listeners who are you and where can they connect with you online?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Leah, for having me on your show. I'm an author and writer. I'm a former journalist and foreign correspondent in Latin America, and now I write novels. And my website is ChristinaHoag.com, and I'm on, let's see, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter or X, whatever it's called, TikTok, all the social media things.
Oh, great.
I mainly write about sort of crime-related noir crime fiction. I like that a lot, and I've written several novels and
Mhm.
let's see, and short stories mainly, and some essays, like personal essays about my life, and I put those on Medium.com. But yeah, that's basically me in a small nutshell.
Oh, that's great. And let's start. The first question is about your career. It seems to be incredible. It has taken you on incredible journeys from reporting in conflict zones to teaching creative writing in a maximum security prison. And how have these various experiences shaped your perspective as a writer and storyteller?
Well, it's certainly given me a lot to write about. I became interested in journalism when I was in high school, so I always wanted to be a writer and a storyteller. And when I joined the high school newspaper, I thought, oh, here's a story. Here's something that I can write for a career.
Mhm.
And I love to travel. I grew up moving around the world because of my father's job. So, and I wanted to travel. So that was something that I
Mhm.
could put both of my passions together. And that's what I ended up doing. And so it's really, to me, it's just been a really exciting time. Was when I lived in Venezuela and reported from around Latin America and the Caribbean, Central America, on lots of different things, including the coup attempt in 2002 in Venezuela, and mudslides, and Colombian peace talks with guerrillas in the jungles. So it's informed my writing in a couple different ways. One is my novel Skin of Tattoos. Was taken directly from interviews that I've done with gang members, both in El Salvador and here in where I live now in Los Angeles. So I became sort of interested in that subculture and wrote a novel about that. A guy trying to get out of the gang, and he gets instead pulled back into the life. And gangs are a universal thing; they're all over the world. It's a human, I think, nature thing that we like to belong in little groups. And then I wrote another book called Law of the Jungle, which is about an eccentric British scientist deep in the jungle of the Venezuelan Amazon, and she's studying spiders and spider venom in Amazon. And along comes a ruthless American entrepreneur, and he steals her research, and then she embarks on a journey of revenge to get her research back. So that was really interesting. Um, but at the same time, I have found that American audiences or readers, they like really American stories, and it's
Uh-huh.
frustrating to me that I can't use my foreign background, and especially my journalism background, in more things, especially the talk, because I found that really exciting. But that said, I did cover a lot of crime and interesting things in the United States, and yeah, so I write about that, as well. So I know about how the police works, how
Mhm.
detectives work, things like that. So I can use that to my advantage, um, you know, because I do kind of know how it works, and I can obviously do more research.
I'm really happy you write about Latin American reality, because me, I'm a Latina, I'm Brazilian, and okay, it's not near Amazon forest, but I really hear a lot about Colombia and Venezuela in news, and it's really interesting to show this reality, especially to people in North America.
Hmm.
Many people think this part of the world is now exotic, and many there are many things similar to the United States in particular, and of course some things, some cultural things are different. You certainly know uh,
Hmm.
uh, about life in Latin America.
Yeah, to me it was an adventure every day, and that's what made the journalism was great. And I stayed for a long time. I spent almost 10 years there, and then finally I had my son, and the schooling and the situation in
Mhm.
Venezuela, political situation, which we now know, was just then starting to decline. And I had my son had to start school, so I went to Miami, and which is almost like the U.S. version of Latin America is Miami. So it was a good bridge, a good transition point back into North American life. But it was really, yeah, as I said, it was fascinating to me, and so many different things. But yeah, a lot of things the same. And I think the problem is U.S. North Americans just don't really pay much attention to what goes on beyond the border, or they just think it's all narco traffickers, or it's all corruption, and there's so many great things that happen in Latin America, and culturally, and so many things to see, the history, everything.
That's true.
It's a fascinating place.
Okay, your latest. Let's talk a little about your latest work. I'm the famous Carlos, the story of Carlos the Jackal. It delves into the life of one of the world's most notorious figures. What drew you to Carlos the Jackal's story, and what challenges did you encounter while researching and writing about such a complex character?
Well, I covered. He actually is Venezuelan, and his name is his real name is
Jackal.
is yeah, is Ilyich Ramirez Sanchez. That's his
Okay.
real name. Carlos the Jackal is his nom de guerre. Um, so I ran into that story when I lived in Caracas, and
Hmm.
his family, who's still there, they were trying to get him out of prison, or to get the French government to transfer him. He's in prison in France, from France to Venezuela to serve his sentence. Of course, the French are not having any of this. They don't, because he would probably escape or be treated very
Hmm.
leniently. So they were hoping to get the Venezuelan government to pressure the French government to transfer their family Ilyich back to Venezuela. So I covered that end of the story, and I just amassed a lot of research. And I interviewed his brother, and later on, sent a few emails or corresponded briefly with his lawyer, who became his wife in Paris.
Hmm.
Um, so I was looking around, I had all the books and lots of articles, and I thought, why not, I should do something with this. So I wrote, there are biographies about Carlos the Jackal out there. So I wrote kind of like a fictionalized, dramatized version of his story. So it reads like a novel. It's all based on fact, but I, did put little bits of dialogue in, and things like that, and tried to make it as sort of more of a narrative version as I could. Um, but it is all based on fact. Um, but one of the challenges was that, there's you do your research, and then you'll find differing, conflicting accounts of the same things. You'll say, that he went back he was in a training camp in Jordan in 1972, and he stayed there for 9 months. And you'll find, no, he was there only for 2 weeks, and he went back to London, and things like that, and it's impossible to say what the truth is. So I had to sort of glean what, try and corroborate these differing accounts and see, if I could find more than one source that said different, to back one version of events, and also what made the most sense, because so that was the biggest challenge, was just trying to nail down what actually was the fact, the real thing that happened. There were just a couple things, points there that sort of conflicted in what he did. But as I said, I did the best I could, and I think it's a pretty, it's a pretty entertaining tale. He certainly is an interesting figure.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes themes of crime, psychology, and human condition, they can entertain us too. Many people like action movies, for example, and some of these stories are completely unreal.
Yes, this is true. Larger than life, larger than things. I think it taps into something that we wish we could do, and then we see somebody else doing it. Somebody robbing a bank. I mean, who wouldn't like to just go in and grab all that money in a bank? But most of us are not going to do that. But there are a couple of us who will, and so we become fascinated by the people who do these daring, risky things. And I think that's why people get fascinated by people who do, terrible things, like Carlos the Jackal, who was a terrorist, or do these outrageous crimes and things.
And how do you approach the crafting stories that blur the lines between fiction and reality, drawing inspiration from your extensive journalistic background?
You have to be true to the story, because sometimes too much knowledge actually about a thing can sometimes be an obstacle, because you want to stick to the truth. My background as a journalist, I have to do, it won't happen like that. It wouldn't happen like that. It would happen like this, and this. But at the same time, maybe that's not the best story, so you have to skip some steps. Which is what you see in TV all the time. All of a sudden the detective finds the killer, or has a piece of evidence just crops up. Well, it doesn't really happen like that in real life. We know that, but we have to tell an interesting story. So you really have to put the story first, and then just try and make it plausible as possible. But sometimes making it as realistic as possible, is going to be boring, because most of life really is boring.
Yeah. Well, about your experience as an expat in 7 countries, I think it must have provided you a rich tapestry of experiences. How do your multicultural upbringing and global perspective inform your writing, and in particular in terms of portraying diverse characters and settings?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I'll just give you the rundown. My parents, my father was from New Zealand, my mother's English, and they met in Africa, in Central Africa, in what is now Zambia. And when they were there, it was the last days of the British colonial empire, if you will, in a country, it was called Northern Rhodesia, and they were in a remote mining town, copper mining. And I was almost born there. And at the last minute, I think just before I was born, they went to New Zealand, where I was born. And 3 weeks later, we went to Fiji in the South Pacific, where my father worked at a gold mine. And then he got a job with a Swedish company. We went to Sweden and England, and then to Nigeria. And we lived in Lagos, Nigeria for a while, and then back to New Zealand, which is really where, I start remembering things. And we were there, and then we went to Sydney, Australia, and then finally to New Jersey when I was a teenager. And that was sort of the most difficult move, because I was old, an old kid at that point, older. So, yeah, I mean, I just think, I think in terms of global characters, and I think it makes me make more interesting characters, because I know, like in Law of the Jungle, I made her a British scientist from Cornwall in England, which is where, near where my mother is from. So I know that little area, that little corner of the world. So I made that her background. And I can make different, inform more richer characters, I think, by giving them more these different types of backgrounds or come from different places, different names. I love unusual names. I have a notebook, and if I hear of a name or something, I write down different names or different things that I might use for a character every now and then. And so I think it makes me, it just makes me, I can draw on a deeper well of experience in writing.
This is amazing. I really enjoy to know people from different places, and I always learn a little from each culture. It really helps us. Besides, beyond the to avoid prejudice, but we can also incorporate some habits from different cultures to our daily life. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's what I love about traveling. I love to travel and living in different places. Is you do incorporate different things and different tastes. I could never, after traveling to living. I lived in Spain for a year.
Mm-hmm.
In my 20s. After that, I cannot drink American coffee after that. I mean, it's just horrible, because the Spanish coffee was so good. It's real espresso, really, really rich coffee that, you drink just a little tiny cup and you're like, boom, the caffeine, you're like bouncing onto the pavement. It's things like that, and mango, for example, is my favorite fruit because I ate tons of mangoes when I was in Venezuela. There were mango trees everywhere in Caracas. So we always have a lot of mango. So you develop different tastes, and sometimes it's difficult. Now the world is much smaller, so it's easier to find things like good coffee or mangoes things. But sometimes, you say, oh, I really wish I could have different things from, different places that you've been. But I think it's just great to be exposed to different things. And the way, and you're right, I mean, the way people do things is sometimes different. And there's no right or wrong way in doing things. I think there's just different ways. And I think that's one thing you really learn when you travel, and especially when you live abroad. You see, there are just different ways of doing things. But I'm not, so I think I have a much broader mind than a lot of people who haven't traveled. They think, oh, this is the only way to do it. Oh, they do that, and then I'm just like, no, there are different ways of doing things.
Well, and the episode you chose, when I firstly recorded the episode, two things called my attention. The first one was a guy seated at the subway, at the metro. He was wearing a T-shirt with the words "Be the Revolution," and then it reminded me of a traditional song from Estonia, Revolution. I really enjoy listening to songs from all the world. And both the song and the T-shirt inspired me to discuss about the meaning of revolution. What's the real meaning, and will a revolution really change a society or a reality? These are the questions I make on the original episode. And how do you define revolutions? And what do you believe are the essential ingredients for igniting meaningful change, whether it's on an individual or societal level?
Yeah, I think I think it's a fascinating topic. As I said, I covered sort of the peaceful revolution of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, which
Oh,
he instituted. And he wanted to remake the country in a peaceful way without doing sort of a violent revolution like in Cuba. And so there are different ways to do revolution, but the thing is, the people with the vested interests are never going to want change. So you're going to, that's where you get the conflict. But I always admire revolutionaries. Carlos the Jackal, he thought of himself as a revolutionary, and he just thought violence was the way that he was going to free the world, or liberate Palestine. He worked for the Palestinian organizations. So people who commit to those kind of causes always really fascinate me. Who really put their life on the line to change for a bigger cause of societal change, political change, that kind of thing. I mean, it's not every person who does that, and it's can have obviously people do get killed, sacrifice their lives. So I just think it's a really interesting topic. I'm interested in political revolution, and I think and on an individual level, I'm glad you said on an individual level, we have to create revolution in our own lives sometimes to get the things we want, or just to be the people we want to be. And I think too many people are afraid to change things. For example, I went abroad. I quit my job. I was working at a newspaper in New Jersey, and I was really bored. And I thought, I'm not getting closer to my dream was to be a foreign correspondent. And so I quit my job and I went traveling, and I ended up, as doing what I wanted to do, which is being a foreign correspondent. So that was like a little, Christina revolution to get what I wanted. And I, don't regret it one bit. I mean, I wish I just did it earlier, in my life, instead of hanging out at that newspaper in New Jersey, which was for so long. So I think we have to be less afraid to do our own personal revolutions. And, sometimes it can be leaving a bad relationship, things like that. We have to be willing to really change things, to move on and make a better life for ourselves.
oh, I'm completely agreed with you, because I just a second.
Mm-hmm.
I have to answer my door, and I'll be back.
Oh, okay. We'll take a break.
Okay. Um, Thanks for waiting.
No problem.
And now, don't worry, I'll edit this
Oh,
part.
okay.
And the next question is about traditions and cultural symbols, because the it's the theme you chose, and you have a huge experience in different cultures. It really interested me. I have friends from many parts of the world, especially during the pandemic. I decided to do what I didn't do in my whole life, to leave my borders and meet people from other parts, even if it was online.
Mm-hmm.
And I started very good relationships, and I learned many things without leaving my country. But if there is the possibility, I won't think too much. I really want, is a wish I have on my life.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Well, how do you see traditions and cultural symbols intersecting with the concept of revolution, and how can they be leveraged to inspire positive change in today's world?
Well, revolutions often take symbols, people to put on T-shirts or their hats, or hold up on a cardboard box or what have you. It becomes a very important part of a revolution. It's sort of like the banner of a revolution. You can look at Che Guevara, for example, in Cuba. He's become like a symbol. That one picture of him, that photo, that very famous photo, and he's got his beret with the star on it. That's a symbol of revolution. In Venezuela, it was the red beret that Chavez wore. That became his symbol. I'm sure there is some symbol in Ukraine right now. The flag, I know, the blue and yellow flag, those colors have become very symbolic in things. So I think those things always take on a big symbolism in any kind of political movement. And I think, and it's something that serves to gather people around, to rally. It's an easy way to gather people around and to rally people. And things, I think different cultural traditions, when I was in Venezuela, they had these huge marches and rallies. I mean, just thousands of people would come out. And I mean, I don't know if that would work. That doesn't really happen in North America. There isn't that kind of passion or fervor to get people really out in the streets marching. In Brazil, they have done that, really big marches. Yeah. And people really get out in the streets. And I think, in Latin America, people are much more passionate about things, and maybe, there's more to fight for, there's more of a struggle. Whereas, in North America and Europe, people are they tend to be more affluent, better off, and they just, so. And there's also more, I think, a tradition in Latin America of oral tradition. It's a very, in Latin America, people like to talk a lot. They engage with each other a lot more. Where in Europe and America, people are very reserved. Like you join a queue, a line in Venezuela or Rio or wherever, and all of a sudden somebody's talking to you and they tell you their whole life story inside of like 5 minutes. You know everything about that person, or you sit next to a person on a bus in Colombia or Ecuador, and then but that won't happen if you go to France or Germany. Everybody just stands there like this. They don't really engage a lot. So I think in Latin America, it's much more cultural to engage verbally and emotionally with other people. It's a much more interactive culture. So I think that translates into revolution. They have big marches and rallies, and people are out there, and people like to be around other people. Whereas here it's much more subdued, reserved.
As someone who was born and raised in Rio, I completely agree with you. I'm an introvert, but all my family, people around me, they really don't understand what is to be an introvert.
Right. I know. I've often thought that it must be very difficult to be an introvert in Latin America, because people talk a lot and they talk, and I'm very introverted too. And being from another culture where that isn't. So I was like, a very odd duck. I think people thought I was very odd, but I appreciated all their, they're very outgoing, people in Latin America, very outgoing and very extroverted culturally. But of course there are introverts, as in everywhere. But,
and even for me, I had
it's hard.
When I talked for the first time with an European, because I was always thinking, am I being pleasant? Is this person cold? Is this person nice to me? And you are right. They are really reserved. They need time to open themselves.
Yeah, it's just a cultural difference. And you notice sometimes people, like in Latin America, they stand very close to you. They'll come like right, and I find myself, stepping back, because people stand closer together, because they must, again, they're much more at ease being all, pushed in together or talking together, interactive, things like that. And, people often said to me, oh, United States, people are very lonely there. People live alone too much. And we do. We live very alone lives. When, they'll just be, most people, doesn't matter, doesn't, not a big thing to live by themselves. Whereas in Latin America, people don't live by themselves very much. They live with their families or usually family oriented things. But here, people live by themselves. And I don't know if that's, again, I don't know if that's a healthy thing. We are social animals, humans. We live in groups. And it does spur a lot of loneliness and depression and things like that. So again, it's a different way of living that, even though we live in a wealthier countries, may not be the best way.
Oh. Well, now let's talk about empowerment and social change. As a writer and educator, your storytelling was a tool for empowerment, whether it's through your novels or your work with marginalized communities. How do you see storytelling contributing to the broader narrative of revolution? And what role do you believe writers play in amplifying voices and catalyzing transformation?
You ask very deep questions. It's really good. One of my novels is called Girl on the Brink, and it's drawn from my own experience, and it's about abuse of domestic violence, which is called here, about abusive relationship. And so I wrote that because I got into a bad relationship, and this guy was just horrendous. And finally, I got myself away from him, but it was difficult. It was very difficult, and so I wanted to write a book aimed at teenage girls as they start, going out with boys and going on dates and things. And so I wrote my story in sort of a teen way, but that was a way of, empowerment, of empowering teenage girls to know what the signs are of an abusive relationship, because there are what we call red flags. There are definite signs that that this guy is not as great as you think he is initially, because initially you think he's absolutely wonderful. He's Prince Charming and Mr. Wonderful, and because he comes on very strong, very strong. Oh, I love you. You're the most beautiful person. It's all, a method to get control. So so that was definitely something that I wrote as an empowerment tool. And I think it's been one of my more popular books. Frankly, it still sells and whatnot, and I'm glad I wrote it. I really am proud of that book, and I think writers can serve to write books of empowerment or for social justice or change or what have you. And especially in Latin America, there's such a strong tradition of writers and literature serving as that tool. If you look at Mario Vargas Llosa in Peru and Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Carlos Fuentes, they all were very involved in politics, which is, again, not the case here. Here in North America, writers are much more, they're in their own little thing. But I think, in Latin America, writers tend to take on more of a political role and write about the voiceless, giving a voice to the voiceless. But you can, I think it's definitely a tool that can be used for revolution. And this is why you get things like in China, the Cultural Revolution. The first people they went after were the writers, writers, artists, poets, the intellectuals, because they were the ones putting it out there, about revolution. The power of the pen is mightier than the sword. So it definitely serves a big role.
Well, it's really interesting to talk about it. I'm also a blogger, but it's something really informal. I really write in blogs since I was 17 years old as a diary. And I wanted to share my reality with the world, to I don't know, maybe find people who face the same conflicts and probably give solutions to them, and also learn from people who read my blog and my words to inspire me to do something. By the way, the motto of this podcast is inspire and engage. So
Good. I
it's
like it.
it's my mission. And well, a question I always ask people here is, what's your biggest failure and what you learned from it?
Biggest failure. Well, it may actually be that relationship, that I
Mhm.
got into this bad relationship, and I learned a lot about myself. That I was really, I never thought of myself as being vulnerable to something like domestic violence or emotional abuse. I thought that was always someone else. And so I had to realize that, I was a flaw, had flaws, and this guy immediately picked up on that, and that I was bad at setting boundaries and all these other sort of emotional things, and that and bad things happen to good people. That's what I sort of ended up as, and I gained a new understanding also of mental illness, and what that not everybody is um, sane, is mentally there, and you have to watch out for that. And there are people who take advantage of people. So I never really run into that, until that point. I thought everybody was sort of, I knew good people, bad people. I've never really run into really sort of um, people who were sort of crazy and just kind of, cruel. And so I learned a lot about human nature, and I learned a lot about myself, that and I did get myself out of it, and looked at the reasons I got into it and what caused me to get into it, and whatnot. So I think that is probably my biggest failure, I would say.
Well, it's a powerful message, especially for those who want to start a new relationship. I really faced not a so similar problem, but it really damaged my self-esteem in the long term. I suffered much bullying at school. I had many bullies, even my teachers. It was a horrible phase of my life, and I really, it's really contributed me to mistrust people. I grew
Mm,
up thinking who I wanted to bring into my life, and well, it helped me in a at a first moment, but if you start mistrusting everyone else around you, uh, you will have no one. And and then I started my therapy, and I learned to see the bright sides, little by little, see the bright sides of each people. It's really hard, but uh, it we really need to give a try, especially after some moments of abusive relationships. It's a powerful
yeah, it's
message.
part of the recovery process is learning to trust yourself. You have to trust yourself that you're
Oh,
choosing the
so
right people to bring in, as you
so
said, to bring into your life. You have to learn to trust yourself again. And but yeah, well, I'm glad you did that and went to therapy and stuff. I mean, there are many people who can't get out of it, and who don't take the time to look at the self-examine. Um, and oftentimes they fall back into it. These kind of things, but I think it all goes into a learning experience. If we don't take chances, you never learn anything and you don't grow. And that's what I found. I went abroad. As I said, I quit my job and went traveling first to Guatemala, and then I ended up in Venezuela. And, I took that chance. I took a big jump off the cliff, and it worked out. Some things don't work out, but you never know until you try. And I think people are too afraid to try things. So we have to try.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And um, now I know you have many influences around the world, but who are the most influential people in your life, if you
Hmm.
have someone?
Well, it was probably my mother, and my parents, I think, because they traveled a lot, and they took big chances leaving their own countries and their own homes. They're both from working class families, and went off. My mother was a nurse and went first to Aden in Yemen, which is now completely off limits. But she worked at a British hospital in Yemen for a while, and then she went to northern Rhodesia, where she met my father. My father was from a very small, tiny little village in New Zealand, and went into mining and went off to Africa. So I think, to me, that just I admire them for doing that, and especially looking at where they came from. Um, my mother had two sisters-in-law who never even learned to drive, and she went off. And my mother, for some reason, I often said, why did you do that? Why did you just take off and go to Yemen? And she said, well, I just wanted to do other things. I knew there was a world out there, and I wanted to do more. And again, what makes some people do that and some people don't is a mystery, and ambition or motivation. But so I think those are really the biggest influences on me, or my parents, which is probably not a very exciting answer, but that's really it. And then on a literary influence, I love Graham Greene, the British author, and he traveled a lot, and he wrote these books about, one was in Haiti, the comedians, one was in The Power and the Glory, set in Mexico, Cuba, Our Man in Havana in Cuba. And, so I wanted to always be like him, go to these different places and write books, write a novel set in these different places and things. It hasn't quite worked out. As I said, I tried sort of to do that, but I didn't find much of a reception these days with novels set in books set in foreign places. But I really admire that. And he wrote a lot about being the outsider in a different place, which I was as an expat or as a foreigner. You're an outsider, and coming into a new place. So I still love Graham Greene books.
Uh, uh, well, your answer is just. I think everyone who had a solid family base will have the family as the biggest inspiration. In my case, I think my biggest inspiration is my great grandmother. She
Mm.
was an incredible woman. I had the privilege of living with her until 15 years old, when she left this world. And she was really smart. She had a huge library, and I read lots of books from this library. Uh, and she shared many stories to me, and she was still very feminine. She had this beautiful style, and until nowadays, my father tell me I'm really similar to her, and
Mm.
I tell him, okay, she inspires me a lot. She was a great woman in my life.
Well, obviously, you speak English. You learn to speak English. You even you're doing an international podcast. For people around the world. So yeah, that shows that you're curious about the world. And I think people who read books are curious people. Because you learn so much from books. You can.
Well,
open your mind.
for sure. Uh, the one who, by the way, the one who inspired me, actually, he imposed me to learn English was my father. I wanted to learn Spanish first. I love to speak Spanish.
Me too.
Oh, but he told me, no, English is more important than Spanish. And then I started the course, and I'm thankful to him. I,
Hmm.
I tell
Well,
him, I,
yeah, there's no question English has become the English the international, the world language. It used to be French. 100 years ago, it was probably French, but well, I hope you still learn. But do you still know Spanish? Did you learn Spanish eventually?
oh, yeah,
Ah,
after,
okay. After
after
English.
finishing, I started Spanish. And now I'm also learning Japanese.
Oh, wow.
I love to learn new languages. Well, can you tell us one thing about yourself that most people aren't aware of?
Well, most people are not aware of my background, that I grew up in 7 countries and then I lived in 3 more as an adult. I went to Spain, Guatemala, and Venezuela. So most people don't know that. I don't advertise that too much. Just because people they never know really what to say about that. Like, oh, was your father in the army? No. And then a lot of times they just kind of like, oh, and then they go on, and they don't really know what to make of it. It's just beyond their comprehension. So I don't talk about that a lot. Um, so most people don't know that. And what else? I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's really great. But our time is almost
Okay.
over. There are 5 more questions before we finish this beautiful episode. And well, the first question of this round is uh, what's your way of showing up for yourself every single day?
I try and write, and I try and really protect that time. The people, when you say you're a writer, people think you're just like, they can, oh, well, you can do that. Can you do this for me? Can you just take that for me? And it's like, no, I've learned to really, that's my work time. That's really my work time. And I do other freelance, like public relations writing that, to earn some money. But so I have to protect my writing time which is usually the mornings. I like to write in the mornings, and I have to protect my. I also try. I've begun swimming every day too, and that also is showing up for myself. And that I really, I wasn't doing enough exercise. And so I really, and again, I'm trying to really protect no, I cannot do that. I have to go swimming, and set boundaries. So maybe boundary setting is more the way of showing up, is just saying, I have to, this is my time to do this, and I can do that later. So I think that's important in life, is setting your own boundaries because you need to do things for yourself.
Oh, for sure. Well, I must say I'm learning this after 3 years and some months of therapy to set boundaries.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's really important.
Yeah, it is. It is. Otherwise, you get run over, and people sense that oh, well, she's a nice person. She'll do this, and then they ask you, and of course, you want to do it because you want to help people or whatnot, and you are a nice person. But then you end up, not doing anything for yourself, and then feeling resentful. So it really is important to set your boundaries.
And what's your favorite word? It can be in any language, not necessarily in English.
Hmm. Spanish has a lot of great words. I love. I'm just trying to think of any good Spanish words. I can't think right now, but there's some really great words that are just a lot of syllables, and they're very staccato. I love the staccato sound of Spanish. I'm just trying to think, and then what's some great words? I was just thinking of one the other day. I said, "Oh, this is a great word," and I can't think with the top of my head. Maybe it'll come to me. Oh well. The next question will come back.
Okay. And do you have any superstition?
No, I really don't. I
Oh,
don't. Yeah, I'm not superstitious at all. I don't go with that. I like, I read. I like to read my horoscope every month or something, but just for fun. I don't really take it very seriously. Um, do I have any other superstitions? No. Other than just, I really like to write in the morning. That's my, I guess
you
that's my
certainly know people here in Latin America, they are very.
very. Mhm.
I remember I know many people who enjoys betting our personality by this zodiac sign and oh so sometimes it's fun as you say but
Yeah.
sometimes it's really limits in a box. So I avoid superstitious. Although being a religious person, I really do enjoy superstitions too.
I like to
And
see it. They're fun. I mean, people do have different superstitions, especially in different religions and things. So those are interesting cultural things. But personally, I don't really follow anything like that.
okay. And what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would advise be more confident in myself and not look to other people. Again, be more confident in myself and who I am, and know that I am worthy. And I was worth more than probably I thought of as my of myself, and to push myself more. That forward in my career and put myself forward for prizes and awards and things, because I would shrink back and wait for other people to put me forth, but I should have put myself out. Um, being more confident in myself and my talent and ability, I think I could have got further along than I did.
It's a great advice, and it has to do with the theme of these episodes, of course. We must make our personal revolution
Hmm.
if we want to see our life moving.
Yes, be the star in your own movie, the star in your own movie of your life.
um, and let me see. Okay, you already said your morning routine, but do you have any special morning routine? And how does it inspire for your day?
Yeah, I just like to write in the morning and then do some exercise and then just try and do other things. Apply to be on podcasts, or submit my stories for publication, or do other things, or try and get exercise every day, and try and not. I don't eat a lot, but I like to just small meals,
Mhm.
and I'm always planning a trip. I love to travel, so I like to always be, have a trip to look forward to at some point. So that's
Oh,
that's my that's my vice. My weakness is to travel.
it's a dream for me to plan a trip every day. I must confess I have many travel apps on my phone, and
Hmm.
sometimes I look for different places and then I plan imaginary trips.
Yeah, I have many imaginary trips that I think, well, I'm going to do this one day, but I've often looked, oh, I'd go here and here and here. So, but it's fun. And then I like watching movies and TV and things like that, and reading, of course. I read a lot.
This is a great habit. And lastly, what are three unique skills that made you successful?
One, that I was willing to take chances and risks, and I'm not afraid. I don't have a lot of fear, so I was able to both take chances in my life, and then in reporting, I didn't. I would go into situations, into slums, for example, or poor areas that never bothered me. Talk to different people, gang members, or go into a prison, or that I don't have a lot of fear, and I think that really. Really helped me get better stories in journalism, and just, as a person, just not being held back by fear. What else? And I think I'm broad-minded from traveling so much, and just, again, I don't judge people. And people always say, "Oh, you're easy to talk to," because I don't judge them. I don't like judgmental comments. And again, I think I grew up in many different places. So, as I said, we said before, there are many different ways of doing things. I don't believe there's just one way, or there's many different ways of thinking. And to me, that's interesting rather than just one way. So I don't argue with people. I don't judge people. I just think, it's interesting.
And this is the end of our episode. Do you have a final message to our listeners?
Make your own revolution.
Oh, it's a great message. And a bonus question is, DKLA's doors are always open to you. Would you come back if you could?
Absolutely. You ask very good questions, very thoughtful questions. And I've done, a number of podcasts, and you really make good questions. So
Uh,
I would definitely
oh,
come back.
oh, for sure. Oh, and you are always welcome. Thank you very much for taking part of this episode. I hope you have many success in your future projects, and I wish you the best.
Well, thank you. And same to you. I hope you keep podcasting, you get to travel and do your blog and all great stuff. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, and bye.